You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering Finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seatbelts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabalcast. And this week, we're covering kind of like an ongoing story. A little bit ago, as in a year or more, Huey was put in charge of Pro Play. So some changes came to it. We've been in the RCQ system as it stands today, with Huey in charge for about a year and a half now, and now we have more events, which might be the return of other stuff. So with that, we wanted to take a look actually at RCQs. As a judge, as a store, as a player, how does this RCQ format feel compared to things that were in the past? What was good? What was bad? Cover it all.
All right. So up top, I'm going to take things from a judge perspective because that's basically what I've been doing since Dragon's Maze, is I've been judging effectively PTQs of every size that I could, and every format. So limited, constructed, sealed, you name it. I guess it would be limited. But the things that I'm noticing now are a little more unique than when we were in the PTQ system or the PPTQ system. And the first thing that I'm noticing is that 2 in a season per store means that I actually had more opportunity to judge events, despite the fact that there is a wealth of judges here. And so that's been a little more unique than anything else. Previously, you'd see the same judge squads at a lot of the events. You'd get to know them, and they would basically gobble everything up. Now there seems to be a lot more opportunity, and I'll go on to speak about that a little bit later, because I have a kind of unique situation here compared to a lot of others. 2 a season also means that I saw a lot of the same people from inside the region for every format of RCQ that I've judged since the changeover about a year ago. So that is everything from sealed. The last sealed I did was, I was going to say KTK, that's not correct. Murders at Karlov Manor. Then the next one I'll be doing is Duskmorn in 2 weeks, a week after this episode releases. I have done a number of Pioneer events, pre-bannings. I don't think I've done one since. And a number of modern events, also pre and post MH3, and then the bannings. So through all of that, I've actually begun to recognize a lot of players and what stores they actually belong to, not just frequent, because we have local to us in Glassboro, New Jersey, the comic book shop or the comic book store, whichever one it is. If you watch the Star City circuit in the early 2010s, I think AJ Kerrigan famously just sported that hunter green polo, and all the players from that store that come out and play that. The majority of people that I'm seeing generally travel about 30 to 45 minutes, which means that we're seeing more area locals and fewer travelers, which is very different than the PTQ system way back in the day, where you would have people driving 3 and 4 hours to get to the next PTQ, because that was the only way to queue straight into the Pro Tour at that point in time, unless you wanted to spike a GP. You had a better bet doing that.
Yeah.
Now, again, where I live in New Jersey, you would expect people from Philly to come over, but we actually don't really get that. People in Philly have closer options than a store 25 minutes away and a bridge toll. Yeah. So we get a lot of people from up and down the western side of New Jersey, and a couple people that come in from the seaboard. It's about 60 to 90 minutes, and there are not a lot of WPN stores over there at all. It seems more like a One Piece and whatever else is under Digimon in terms of popularity kind of area at the short points. It's kind of interesting. Now, this means that we're keeping locals local, and the pin that you get at the RC with your store name on it becomes a really big badge of pride. That's, it might not be exactly the store that you play at. It might not be your home store, but it is a store that is local to you. your environment produced these winners. It is a very small group of people. It is, like I said, a badge of pride. It is fantastic for people. And we get to see that as judges. The lanyard is also one of the more sought after pieces of the RCQ kit.
Yeah.
Like people really care about those two items. It means a lot to them. Now, as a judge, this is a great opportunity to work Comprel events, and it feels like we have more events in region than ever before, so it really does help you hone your skills as a judge. You might not like the fact that there are judges at RCQs because WotC says you don't need them, but you should have them because they are fantastic. They help smooth out the overall flow of the events. They make sure everything runs smoothly. They answer questions about how Dress Down operates in Modern. They basically spackled...
And humility and legacy.
Yeah, they spackled the gap for questions about Nadu when there was nothing in the rules documents about them. They are there for you, and being able to continue to hone your skills allows you to basically apply throughout region, apply up, and give players and stores a better experience, which is fantastic. I've never felt like I've had this many opportunities to kind of hone my craft. Now, the unique situation I mentioned before is that right now I work directly with an L3 who is my area coordinator, and having access to all of these RCQs in area lets our L3 train up a number of new judges in region to, again, better help serve the player base in the community. After a time, your L2s don't need to work every RCQ, your L1s do. And by giving your L1s those opportunities to work with L2s and other L1s who are moving through the system, you are, again, better serving your judges and your players. You're not going to run afoul a lot of these experiences that you read about on social media that are just miserable experiences because people are no longer able to be trained properly. And a lot of that is no fault of the judge staff or the stores. A lot of that has to do with WotC and their removal of...
Shitty.
Exactly. You don't need judges for this. We're not supporting the judge program, etc. A lot of that is kind of top down from them about why these judge experiences are miserable. But if you have a dedicated group of judges and a dedicated group of stores, you can, again, spackle that gap.
Yep.
And then the last 2 points I have, the next one's kind of a neg overall. The last two aren't, just this one. Stale formats are very noticeable as a judge, and lower attendance becomes very predictable because of that. Yep. But that kind of works in judges' favors because they get to constantly expose themselves to a given format for 3 months on end to kind of better understand the interactions that are going on within that format and kind of help better the player experience in those formats. I mentioned Dress Down earlier. We with MH3 release in the middle of the Modern season, the judges that had got to exist in that ecosystem for an entire quarter could answer a lot of those questions a lot easier than ever before when we were just kind of moving through the formats very quickly. We would have a Modern event, then a Pioneer event, then a Standard event. You didn't get a lot of exposure to these formats. So it helps, again, build up the knowledge base and skill set of judges as well as players, because players are given the opportunity to kind of self-serve if they understand what's going on inside a game. And it's not like we want them to. We are more than happy to answer questions. But when you understand how things interact, the game can overall just be cleaner and faster. And then the last point I have as a judge is that seeing the same players at every RCQ helps build rapport between me and them. And eventually I can kind of start to survey them for what they would like to see at these events and help improve their experience, which is super important to, again, both the judges and the store. And we're going to get different feedback.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, a player isn't going to give good judge feedback to the store. They will give negative judge feedback to a store, and that's perfectly fine. Please, positive or negative, give that for judges, give that information to the judges so they can discuss themselves as well.
Yep.
One of the things my L3 likes to do is after we start the top 8, we basically have a debrief for the event, and we talk about things that we saw each other do that we thought were good, things that need improvement, etc. It gives us that opportunity to reflect on the event as judges. But the players are the ones inside the event that actually get to experience us using the skill set. So any feedback that can come from them about either the event, how it's run, or the judge staff. Super important. And building this rapport really helps with that. When they get to see us all the time, they get to familiarize themselves with us and us them. Super helpful for us. No.
Yeah, it's really something that I think has kind of been missing since the PTQ days, and this was something that we had experienced as well, is I don't remember a time where there was such a familiarity with the judges at events, and you had that kind of open dialogue since PTQs were a thing.
Yep.
And that is definitely a strength of this.
Yeah.
So.
You could expect it at the Grand Prix level. You would see a number of judges kind of move along with that kit. But yeah, outside of that, at the lower levels, yeah, you wouldn't really see that, especially in regions that are very popular, just populated. I was going to say very, it doesn't have to be, just really, really populated. Back in New England, you're gonna see a lot of the same judges from like Mass, New York, and Rhode Island traveling around. I think there were a couple L2s and maybe an L3 in Maine before we moved over to the Judge Academy, so you would see them at events as well. And then after that, it was just this kind of roving band of L1s that you wouldn't really get to experience all that often.
Yeah.
Because, as I mentioned, the higher level judges gobbled up all that experience, and there weren't as many events. So you didn't get to familiarize yourself with your like F&M judge if you weren't going to F&M all the time. And that judge would never really appear at a PTQ. So you would not have that familiarity, which made it very difficult, even for new stores. You had to reach out into, I forgot what the system was called when WotC owned it. But
I remember you would post the almost like a want ad.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Looking for a judge. And that was basically how you would start your relationship with a judge. Like I helped one of the stores I was playing at the most because they had modern too. Them and another one start up for standard, because I found the ad. And so they got to familiarize themselves with me, and I got to familiarize themselves with the player base, not through PTQs, but through F&Ms and pre-releases, because those were guaranteed to fire at those stores. That's what they wanted to engage with. They didn't want to do PTQs or PPTQs or whatever. It's super helpful.
Yeah.
From a store standpoint, these are the things that I've noticed. So I'll throw out some points we can discuss, and then you can run off with what you see at the store level.
Yeah.
My LGS has an event coordinator, and they have an easier time scheduling RCQs because everybody wants to talk about the RCQ. They all get together to talk about the RCQ. It's public information. It's very easy to see. So there are few, if any, scheduling conflicts. One store even had an RCQ on a national holiday because they figured nobody's going to work. We don't want to take up we don't want to take up a holiday weekend. So we'll put it on the Monday, which is perfectly fine for WotC. But they are having a harder time scheduling non-RCQ, non-pre-release events due to how few weekends are actually left. We have so many sets now and so many RCQs in our region that it's really difficult to have an event on a weekend that isn't already scheduled by another store. That's a difficulty. One of the cool things that we're seeing is that we're actually converting some area locals to store locals, and we're seeing them on Friday and Saturday night pre-releases. They might not be playing Constructed, but we're seeing them come back to the store. Yep. That's awesome.
Yeah, that's something we've experienced too. I don't know if they're necessarily invisibles, but it's people that we have never seen before that are not in the system that are now showing up at pre-releases.
Yep.
And it's hey, I played it on Arena, obviously, and I just wanted to check it out. And some of them do ascend to regular status. Yeah.
So the next 2 points I'm going to make are going to seem a little bit out of sequence, but the one I just made and the next two kind of all go together in a weird Venn diagram around this next point. And this goes back to what I said the first thing I noticed with the event coordinator. Stores are stepping on each other's toes locally almost every weekend. There isn't an RCQ or a pre-release, and that has soured players as they think stores are being callous and working against one another. But in reality, we're just trying to schedule events, and the players were going to source the events with the highest EV anyway from this. So it's like if somebody's running a Legacy 1K and somebody else is running a Legacy 1K, you just go to the closer Legacy 1K. It's fine.
Yeah. But
at the end of the day, and this is the last point I'm going to make, and this kind of brings that Venn diagram together, this does lead to higher attendance at our other events. So players came up for a Legacy 1K or our NYSE trial or our Proxy Vintage event, and that has converted them into CEDH players. We saw a bunch of people that came to those larger events at our CEDH event, the various trio events that we play. So as of recording, we have a team trios that's going to be Pioneer, Modern, and Legacy coming up. It will be the weekend past when this airs. I guarantee we will see like a lot of these people at this event. They'll just show up to play in these and like these other wacky events that we do because we've converted them through the RCQ experience. They came to the store, they got to see what it was like. It was on a weekend where they really didn't have to worry. And then they're like, okay, this place is cool. Let me see what else they've got. Oh, this stuff is interesting. Oh, they do Legacy. Oh, they have trios. They do Modern on Tuesdays. I play Modern here on Thursdays, so I can play at both stores. I can get 2 nights of Modern. They draft on Wednesday, but it's not the set. It's whatever. Yeah. Their set drafts are Friday. And they just kind of figure out what they want to do from here, and it just boosts attendance overall. And for us, it's those weirder events like I explained, the CEDH, the Vintage, the Legacy events that we'll draw people in and kind of capture for throughout the year. They'll come to our events. But we do see our players go out to other stores because we're a Modern shop, but it's a really casual metagame on Tuesdays. So we go half an hour up the road to Ron's Comic World to play Modern on Thursdays, where they literally just push the racks aside and put 20-some people there for a really aggressively competitive Modern meta at a comic book store. Like, this is what happens. Attendance just kind of goes up overall, despite the fact that stores do have to step on each other's toes to schedule these events, despite the fact that we are all fighting for the same audience. Everybody does something a little different enough and on a different night during the week or on a weekend where players don't have to just say, I am loyal to this one store and nobody else. No, they can chase their fix however they want. And this is, for me, and our area, we're seeing a rising tide raising all ships.
Yeah. So it's kind of interesting here because we've actually had, thankfully, and I don't say that lightly, a number of closures in the area. Mm-hmm. It used to be that there were, within 30 minutes of me in downtown St. Louis, within 30 minutes,
8,000
there were
stores.
41 within 30 minutes, and we're now down to 32. And it's been kind of interesting because our RCQ system has gotten more localized. It's more of local grinders just going from one to the next, to the point that we've even had, on some weekends, one store will have an RCQ at 10 a.m. and another one will have it at 3 or 4 p.m.
Yes.
So that everyone that drops from the other one drives up and goes to the next one.
Yeah.
And we're kind of at an advantage as far as scheduling goes because a lot of the stores in St. Louis, like, we're all customers at somebody's store before we opened our own, or, we all know each other. And there actually is a fair amount of coordination going on with one another, trying to, like, okay, you're doing an event this day that's a Modern 1K. We don't want to do that because we don't have the population to support multiple 1Ks on the same weekend.
Yeah.
But, being in the Midwest, if someone has a Modern 1K on the same weekend somebody has an RCQ, both of those events will fill. And one of the best things that they've done for stores is, and you mentioned it, is when you get stuck in a stale format, you don't want to play. So while it's not the best option, giving us the choice of limited or the constructed format is better than being in eggs extended and grinding those PTQs out like an idiot because you don't value 16 hours of your time.
Yep.
And that's made it a lot better. Because having that option has gotten some stores where there's a couple stores here that will fire 5 to 6 limited pods every Friday. And those are the limited ringers.
Yeah.
That's where you go. And those stores have been able to say, hey, we're going to cater to our guys and do limited. And you're getting, while they are absolutely limited ringers, they're also casual players. Like, they just play limited every week. That's how they got really good at limited. They go draft with real people. So they'll show up to it, but you'll also get all of your grinders showing up for it as well.
Yep.
And it's made it really nice to actually see, in some cases, Casual players come out for these events, but they're so specialized in their format, they're able to speak the same language as people who are trying to spike it. And that's actually been really good for St. Louis, because one of our biggest divides for a long time, and I had my own part in encouraging this, was, spikes versus Timmies. There was a very big divide between competitive and casual players. And having, as weird as it is, an RCQ system designed by Wizards of the Coast come in and create a way to kind of bridge the gap for that has been pretty fortunate, actually. It's helped our retention. It's helped us showcase ourselves in a very different way than stores did in the PTQ era, which in the PTQ era, you wanted to host a PTQ because, one, that was prestigious for your store. Mm-hmm. And two, that was an event where you could showcase your store to other people to try to get them to remember when big events happen there to go. Because it used to be a PTQ was also a good spot to do a bunch of buys.
Yes. Yeah.
Because if your PTQ had 120 people in it, 120 people showed up and worked on their deck list until 30 minutes before the event and needed 15 copies each of some ridiculous uncommon for some matchup they were never going to play. So you would just buy cards. And that became kind of less of a thing in the RCQ for us here, as this was less of a way for us to get, format specialists or grinders from further out in to bring in new cards. And it's kind of just gotten to, we're trying to get more of those invisibles to be regulars in the store. And that's actually been a really interesting change to watch happen from PTQs compared to RCQs. Because I remember myself, Collector's Cash in Kansas City. It's famous because their bathroom is still broken 12 years later. But that was what they were known for. But you also knew they paid really well on cards. So if I needed to sell some stuff, I was going to make sure to go to their PTQ and sell it. Yep. And now it's just, thankfully, in my opinion, drumming up local business that becomes retained customers.
Yeah.
I think that's great.
Yeah.
The biggest problem that I think Wizards has made for an LGS in this modernized system is actually the lack of judge requirement. We use judges. Everyone should. The amount of stores in our area that have seen fit to cut that expense from their events makes a lot of feels bads for a lot of people. And that's simply awful for the game.
Yes.
It's great for us because people know at our RCQs, oh, you have a judge. Mm-hmm. I can trust that if I have a problem, it will be taken care of appropriately. But there's a lot of stores that don't have that. And there have been times where it's come down to somebody's friend. And that's just bad for everyone. Because, I don't remember the store, but it was some, RCQ, and the owner said the rule worked like this for his friend. Well, now all of the stores around us are stained, or around that store.
Yeah.
And it's a very bad feeling, and it's really bad when you have one of your regulars at your store who doesn't spike your RCQ, but goes to another store and just, gets bodied in finals because someone says that's not how a card works. And that feels very bad. It's bad for the community. It's bad for the game. And little bit of a tangent here. It really makes me wonder, do they understand that judges are necessary for the competitive and casual aspect of the game?
Yeah.
And that's scary as a store owner, especially after all the hubbub of the last couple of weeks with EDH. But
for sure.
Yeah.
I'll work my way backwards through this. So one of the things I've been harping on for years about the judge program and how WotC has been treating it at the LGS level is that by removing the requirements of judges for events where you use effectively the jar in the judging at regular document instead of all the litany of legalese that makes up the game, that you are introducing into a competitive game the idea that judges don't exist until they are there to penalize you.
Yep.
And that creates this I want to use the word stigma, but I think it's wrong. It's just this emotional response, a negative emotional response. The first time the person across from you raises their hand and yells for a judge, and it doesn't matter what the call is about. It just immediately puts the other person on guard. And that is terrible for everyone. It is not difficult to work through that situation as a judge. People are just not prepared for that. What did I do wrong? What is the penalty going to be? Am I going to get a game loss? And then all this just kind of builds and feeds back into the player, and it creates this negative experience from the moment the judge gets to the table, possibly through the end of the event. And you are not preparing players to interact with a judge in any meaningful way.
No.
Aside from that negative way. When in reality, that is, if you've never judged an event from start to finish, you wouldn't know that judge calls are actually the minority of a day for a judge. We are there early, we are there late. And the overwhelming majority of what we do is event logistics. That everything about that event is handled by a judge or a team of judges. And without them, the event doesn't move. It doesn't work, smooth or not. Otherwise, it doesn't matter. But that is all part and parcel of their day. Taking calls is the minority of the day. They're there to make sure your experience in your event fires and operates as flawlessly as it can. And so when people first get to experience that judge call and they have that negative feeling, it basically just becomes what we see in social media, which is this feedback loop of the judges are just the police of Magic. When that's not what we're there to do.
I will never forget, as an aside, being in basically sitting down across from my opponent at a Grand Prix, and I accidentally, my hand, like I was reaching for something, and I pushed some of my deck over. And one card flipped over. And he goes, "You can just put it back." And I go, "No, I know what the solution is, but I'm going to do it anyways." And raised my hand and said, "Judge." And he looked mortified. And I was like, "Look, dude, regardless, like, the fix is the fix. The judge is here to make sure the game's fair for both of us. It's okay. No one's in trouble."
I've called a judge on myself on more than one occasion, and when I'm calling a judge for myself, the first thing I say after I call for a judge is that I'm calling a judge on myself.
Yeah.
So
it's awful that you should have to do that, but that's the dynamic that has been promoted.
Yeah, because we remove judges from the LGS at the jar level, and so the first experience you get is RCQ, and that's it. We don't need to go back to Magic circa 2000 where blinking at the wrong time was a game loss, but like I do want judges at the LGS level more. Okay, now walking back another point. You mentioned the Invisibles are coming out to RCQs, and I didn't think about it until you said it. I can point to the person that is Gruul, all formats, or maybe Slickshot Show Off and Forests, all formats. Whether he actually plays like green creatures, I don't know, but he's slinging pump spells with Slickshot, right? I can point to that person. I can point to the Death Shadow, all formats player. Like I can point to these people. I can tell you what a lot of our locals that don't come out to any other events are going to be on in any given format, because they just kind of come. They jam to jam. That's it.
Yep.
And
I'm just here so I can play.
Exactly. Oh. I just want to play as much Magic as I can because I own the cards. That's it. Yep. And yeah, I didn't think about that, and that is fantastic. We don't usually convert those players into anything meaningful. I don't go to my store Tuesday through Friday. I'm generally too busy. Monday Legacy, weekends Judge. So my only opportunity to see some of those players are again Monday and the weekends. But we definitely have a ton of Invisibles to come out. Talking about buys. For the most part, our events prize out in credit. So that keeps players in the ecosystem. You can use credit to enter events, so that feeds the event feedback loop. You can come in, you can pay for your event in credit, or you win an overwhelmingly large amount of credit. Cool. We have a lot of stuff in the case. You want like some slabs? We got slabs. Pick a game. We got slabs for games. We have commander foils. We have like high-end stuff, reserve.
Judge promos, test prints, etc. Yeah.
Right. It's all there. You can order from cardtitan.com through the store if you want. If it's not on-prem, because it's not
It'll
in the
be
case,
there.
it'll be on-prem in the warehouse. Like,
Yeah.
and so it kind of keeps people in that feedback loop, and we will have players, at the end of the day, sell into something else, or they come in, like you mentioned, and they just have a list of stuff they want to sell before the event, because we have anywhere from 30 to 100 players in any given event. So we just have people sitting down at the little sell corner, and they just push. It is a fantastic time for us to be buying, basically. It's great. You mentioned the opportunity to play limited versus constructed. We knew Nadu was a problem, and we still scheduled a modern event, but we did it for far enough out that the ban had taken place. Yes.
That's good. Yeah.
Because I had that question. I was like, do we think players are going to come out for this event with the shape of the format? And they were like, come hell or high water, we're going to have this thing. And we got the ban before it, luckily. But we knew our Duskmorn sealed event wasn't going to be the weekend prior to this episode's coming out. That is a regional championship DC. That is 90 minutes from us. So we are going to lose all those RCQ players to the RC. So our Duskmorn weekend is October 12th. That's going to be our sealed RC. We do one sealed, RCQ. We do one sealed RCQ per set, basically. We don't alterate unless something is just miserable in a format, but that option is on the table, thankfully.
Streets of New Capenna.
Yeah, so that's kind of how we do things when it comes to formatting. And then with EW coming up, I haven't been solicited, but I assume because you can get buys into the mains, apparently, we're going to start. I'll probably be solicited when I show up on Friday to see how our trio signups are going. Exactly. If I can come in and do that. But, that'll be that won't be like our Gonzo thing, but that's when we'll actually get travelers from hours away.
Yeah.
My NYSC trials had some big name vintage players from New York City, which is 2.5 hours away, coming to where we are because it was cheaper to grind into the event via the trials than it was to just pay for the event. Like trials were $50 or $60, so you got 10 before you would effectively play 10 tries before you had already paid your entry fee once. So like give or take whatever.
Pretty good.
Yeah. So we do see travel for stuff like for those kind of events, the EW trials, those will bring in travelers, but RCQs are this cool little localized niche. Anything else before I tangent for a while?
No, you're good. Let's tangent.
All right. No, I don't want to tangent. I want to go to picks.
Oh yeah. Let's go to picks. That's better.
All right. I'll go first because yours is boring. So
that's true. It is.
This week I'm looking at a Silver Shroud costume from Fallout. This is a piece of equipment from the Naya Dogmeat deck. This costs just 2 generic, and it equips for 3. So for 5 total, you can equip a creature. Cool. But this has flash, and it says whenever it enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. That creature gains Shroud until end of turn. So you actually only pay 2 to equip it the first time, and it has flash. And then the actual static on this says, equipped creature can't be blocked. So if you're thinking, hey, a lot of this text on this card sounds familiar, it's because this is basically Whisper Silk Cloak. So we're going to make that comparison up and down. Now, when I was taking my notes this week, CK was buying 38 copies at $2.50. They had 20 copies at $9 for retail. As of recording, they are buying 22, so we're seeing a reduction there, but they're still buying them for $2.50 each, which means they found that price point where they know they can acquire these without issue when they're sating demand. Somebody who sent in, or however many people sent in the 16 copies, met the demand. We didn't see that dip in price, so it's not the best sign. We would have liked to see numbers go, up, but here we are. On TCG Player, There were 219 listings with a market price of $5.43. There are now 204 listings with a market price of $5.58. So we're seeing the numbers move as we would want them to, in about the percentages we would expect, and I'll give you that information later. I added this card to my watch list May 30th of 2023. CK was buying 89 at $3.80, and there were 221 copies on TCG Player for $7.84. So overall, we've seen a reduction in this card. It looks like we are late, but in reality, we just kind of hit on the back end of this little bit of like flash interest. Not May 2023, sorry, May 2024. So I'll bring up stocks again, and we'll see that this went onto my list because I noticed it spiked, and then it just started plummeting. So I added it basically on the back end of the spike because I figured people just moved in on this. They just sold out of it because this set generated a lot of hype. The equipment deck was kind of where it was at. And now we can just kind of sneak in and buy our copies under in the cover of darkness, basically. As mentioned, when it comes to Commander and its playability, this is Whisper Silk Cloak. I just think it happens to be better than Whisper Silk Cloak. When we look at this card overall in Commander, while Whisper Silk Cloak is the initial comparison point, because they both make the creature unblockable, Whisper Silk Cloak permanently gives the creature Shroud, as opposed to just an end of turn trigger to give Shroud, which is, I think, the important difference here. Obviously, it is, but because it allows you to continue to equip this creature afterwards, that Silver Shroud costume, for me, is the better card overall. This can be played as a combat trick, as the Shroud granting effect only lasts until end of turn on a card with Flash. This kind of leaves you with a creature that can't be blocked, but can be further equipped or enchanted, which is the difficulty in Whisper Silk Cloak. This makes buffing that creature a lot easier because you don't have to juggle the Shroud, and in doing that, it opens you up to any interaction. That's just a point of interaction in the game. Instead, you can just protect it from hand in response to a removal spell with a heroic intervention, slip out the back door, whatever you need to, phase it out, etc., because it doesn't have Shroud permanently. This is basically the difference between Lightning Greaves and Swiftfoot Boots. It's Shroud versus Hexproof. And both of them are fantastic cards, but Shroud can be a lot more limiting because, like I said, you move that piece of equipment off, and now you have a point of interaction where that creature can be dealt with. But because this stays here permanently, it's Shroud until end of turn, you get to basically fizzle that removal spell and then protect it from hand. We have a really important piece in that kind of equipment deck, or that Voltron deck, however you want to look at it. And that's why I think this is better than Whisper Silk Cloak when you compare the two. And now, make no mistake, the enters trigger to attach this for free should not be understated. If it weren't for this overall, I don't think we'd actually even be looking at this card as a playable piece of equipment. It would just be another 2 mana value protection spell, because that's what it does. 2 mana, flash. When this ETBs, attach it to a creature, and that creature has Shroud. So if you do it in response to a removal spell, if they don't have a follow-up removal spell to 2-for-1 themselves, you effectively just blanked their removal. And so this kind of turns into just its own, a counter spell, protection spell, however you want to look at it.
Yeah.
But thanks to the enters trigger, we not only have a 2 mana protection spell, but a 2 mana win con, allowing you to swing with your commander through an opponent's defenses, which is the other really important part about this card. Equipped creature can't be blocked. Now, when we look at this in Commander overall, we do see this with Voltron-style commanders that just want a 21 an opponent, and this goes all the way down to Tiny Bones the Pickpocket, and that deck just wants to ensure that you connect and you make an opponent discard a card. So this really does kind of span the gamut from more casual gameplay with things like Phage the Untouchable, all the way up to more competitive decks like Slicer Hired Muscle. And so this is just kind of a huge draw for this card, in that it just, if your commander faces the place, right? And if your commander just wants to turn sideways, this is the card to be doing it with right here. And I don't think when we look at this list of commanders, anything really speaks of like, hey, this card goes everywhere besides the last two I mentioned. Phage the Untouchable, which says if you cast this from anywhere but your hand, you lose the game.
It goes
and
nowhere.
Slicer Hired Muscle, which is like so close to being a CEDH deck. If not, it hurts. Like, this card cannot be played at tables casually. It just runs people over, and that's not a car pun. It's just what it does.
Yeah.
So we have huge opportunity because we have a huge like pool of people to be interested in this card. Now, from a timeline perspective, when I took my notes, there were 522 copies of this card overall on TCG Player. That is a lot. And this is basically selling 10 copies a day. So we're looking at about a 2-month turnaround time. Now, there were a few small anchors. So when you look at 50 listings a page, Poke.edu had 5 LP copies at $6 on page 2. Ascendant MTG had 19 Nearman copies for $12.58 on page 3. And Last Pack Games had 8 Nearman copies for $33.94 on page 5. So this card goes to the moon in price.
There's that upward price.
It is ridiculous what happens to the price point of this card in time. And again, so this sells about 10 copies a day, so we'll be at a $33 card in about 2 months. The visibility on the Fallout set on Pip looks to be pretty low for the non-titular cards, and Silver Shroud Costume is one of those. Again, it's in the dog meat deck, the Nea, like, I don't know. If you want to call it Voltron, you can do that. There's a bunch of really good equipment and some good auras in there, but it has the ability to play like a non-Voltron game.
Yeah.
So it's just not, it's not Power Fist, it's not any of the armor, it's just this non-titular thing, so it doesn't have a lot of visibility on it. Now we do get Fallout on MTGO, and I'll be linking that announcement. It gets there on October 16th, so shortly after this episode goes live. So I do expect more players to kind of play with this and maybe push it a little bit in various formats, because they finally get to toy with it in the digital frontier. Like, cool. But I do really expect Commander to be the overall driver of this. And once it's on Moto, we do get to see a lot of Moto-only content creators push this card. It'll be fantastic to see what that happens. Otherwise, we're just kind of looking at churning this in about 2 months if we're using TCG Player, and there isn't that kind of content creator bump. I love that the Goldfish Commander games are now played in paper, but that when they were all in digital, this is the kind of card that would just like pop up all of a sudden. Because,
it would sit forever until it was there.
Because Tomer has played Slicer before, like 2 or 3 times. It's on this hits Moto. It could have been upcycled into that deck, etc. I mean, we still might see it in time, but people who focus mainly on Moto get new toys. So I'm expecting a lot of those content creators to kind of help push this up. Those who have been playing in paper have had it for a while now. When it comes to buy lists, I wouldn't really expect them to match the pace of the open market unless there's an incredible draw in paper after the MTGO release. Something like a quick flash demand where the market emptied in a day or so could force buy lists to respond. And like we saw with the CK data, they're just not. They don't have to. $2.50 is about the price they know they can buy as many as they need to sate the current demand. The moment that demand rises is the moment that we'll see that price go up. But if demand drops for whatever reason, the price also falls out, right? So that's the give and take on this. Reprint equity. Like the 40K license, this was difficult for WotC to really rein in and get working in both paper and digital. So what I would expect, we don't see any re-up on any of these cards, either as a reprint wave or reprinted in a new product. Re-upping old cards when repaying for the license seems short-sighted when there are so many other elements of the IP they actually do need to touch on. Again, Silver Shroud Costume, not really a titular piece of the Fallout universe. There's not a lot going on. You can pick, I think we actually had one of the vault suits in one of the decks, which is cool, but I don't think we had any of the Brotherhood armor. I don't think there was any Brotherhood of Steel. And, Silver Shroud is one side quest in Fallout. Yeah. What's the big gun from 4? I don't think we had that as an equipment.
I don't think we did the ECM rifle.
Yeah, like
or the minigun. Yeah.
No, the rocket launcher.
Oh yeah, no, we didn't. The big
like,
boy, Fat
big
Man
boy
launcher.
Yeah, we don't have big boy yet. There's so many other interesting pieces of this universe they need to touch on, similar to the Lord of the Rings universe, the Doctor Who universe, the upcoming Marvel universe. They're not going to get everything in the first go. So if they do come back around to these licenses, and this is a statement that's going to stand for everything that I mentioned and into the future for the ones we don't know, they're not going to re-up on crap.
No,
that's it. It might gap fill if they needed to, but they'll probably just find something else that they haven't utilized to move on to. Like, how many versions of Spider-Man are there floating around in comic form? Chances are we are going to get, with Spider-Man, I would assume, a piece of equipment that represents the web shooters. But there are Spider-Man characters that have organic web shooters or various other pieces of equipment that are web shooters. How many gadgets does Batman have that have a Batman symbol on them that just move him in a direction? Like up, forwards, down. Exactly. Like we're you get the Batarang, but you don't get the grapple gun kind of thing. Like, we're not going to re-up on that. We'll get the next piece of equipment the next time around. We won't revisit necessarily. So that's the reprint equity. Buy quantity on this, straight up, I don't have anything from Fallout because I was waiting to see if it was going to be competitive. There are cards from the Dogmeat deck that I did want to pick up for my own Commander decks, but I haven't played that format in over a year, so I just haven't had any need to. Moreover, I haven't seen any Fallout cards in any decks that I have seen being played at my LGS. Nobody seems to really have engaged with this set in a meaningful way outside of the release. Like, people enjoyed it, they bought it, but they're not really engaging with these cards. So aside from just buying them to sit on for forever until this went up, I just didn't really engage with the set until I thought it was actually going to be worthwhile. Like, the pre-wear formal wear is going to come out on MTGO. People are going to see if it will be worthwhile in the breakfast deck. I don't think it is, but I will own a copy of that card just in case. Just like I owned Shukos and Nomads Encore for years because they did dumb things and extended. So I just held them.
What a great format.
100%. Silver Shroud Costume is one of those cards that I probably will pick up over time if I can re-up my own interest in Commander, because I do play Whisper Silk Cloak, I do play Rogue's Passage in a number of decks, and this card, as I have explained, is just an upgrade to Whisper Silk Cloak, hands down.
Yeah.
And that's how I will engage with it. Also, for what it's worth, by the time we hit the end of the first page for sales, this becomes a $7 card. So
pretty quick, yeah. I was just looking at it.
We go from $5.50 to $7 real quick. But that's my pick for the week.
That's fair. Mine's a really, really easy one. It's kind of obvious. So recently there was a little bit of uproar over some cards getting banned. And one of the arguments was these cards were expensive. Mm-hmm. And you printed these cards that are worth money for the format they are now banned in. So Wizards of the Coast recognized very quickly things were getting out of control and took the control of EDH away from the rules committee because our community is fucking awful, and sent them death threats and a bunch of other stuff. Anyways, when those bans hit, there was one really big winner that I picked all the way back in, I believe, April. I did not know when I picked it that it would skyrocket because Mana Crypt, Jeweled Lotus, and Dockside will get banned in EDH. But I have a sale call for Mana Vault. Mana Vault went up like 600% or some ridiculous thing in some cases when that ban announcement hit, and obviously we've come back down to earth. But when I picked it in April, I picked the Mana Crypt, which was at a price of about $45.
$43.27, picked in episode 267 released on Christmas Day. Not April.
Yeah. Now, buy list is $70 on that. There are a few reasons I am saying this is a sale call. Because one, I don't think it's going much higher. And two, Wizards of the Coast just took back control of their cash cow and wants to do something to drum up consumer faith. To me, that says something like, we have decided to unban Mana Crypt and Jeweled Lotus. And here is a Commander Master set with both of those cards in them. And when that happens, and those cards come back, and more people decide to rule 0 those cards into the format, Mana Crypt takes a shit. I would get rid of them now because we're about to hit our lull. It's close to the holidays, guys. Market's going to go down like it does every year.
Yeah.
And we don't know what set releases are yet for Q1 next year. But I would be willing to bet there is a spring release for a Commander set.
Yeah.
When the announcement comes.
So I want to touch on that really quick because I didn't realize it until I was watching just some content on the bands that Jeweled Lotus and Mana Crypt were basically oscillating in packs. And Mana Vault had not come back for a really long time.
Yep. And
so this is opportunity in 2025 to re-up on that, on Mana Vault.
Exactly. And that was one of the things I cited was this seems to be the boogeyman now because we're going back and forth between these more favorably designed cards.
Yeah.
And I would get rid of them now because I don't see us getting to any point where that value appreciates over the next 2 to 3 months. And boy, do I not want to be caught holding the bag if it gets reprinted, when it gets reprinted, and especially if it gets reprinted in the spring.
Yeah.
This is a driving card. It's something that even before the rules committee debacle and everything, even before those bans, was already a flagship tentpole of the format. The same exact thing they said about Sol Ring in that ban announcement where they were like, we could ban Sol Ring too, but we're not going to. I guess the not untapping was enough for them to hold back. But this is not something I see lasting. I don't see this becoming a $200 card or a $150 card out of UMA again. I just don't think we're getting back there, and I think this is about as good as it's going to get. So if you bought, now is the time to sell them for sure.
Yeah, I agree with everything you said, especially because while the average is coming down, the market is holding, demand will sate, and I think if anything's going to float this, it is going to be Eternal Weekend. We're getting 3 around the world. So if people were hesitant about their Mana Vaults for CEDH and they know they're going to go there and play, then now is the opportunity for them to be picking them up. Also, having them in cases is going to be a popular thing to do. So once we come out of that event, I would expect this to just flatten, just in price, like you said, take a dump, because it's a good card in Commander, but it is not nearly as good as the other two. And it has nothing to do with the one in the top right-hand corner. It has everything to do with the fact that it doesn't untap. Like, it is it is not impossible to untap this thing, but it is not free reign on mana like the other two. So you still want this for your explosive early turns, but after that, it's kind of a crapshoot. If you owned copies that weren't from UMA or Double Masters, those might be worth holding on to, but I think anything that's old, that's newer than revised might actually be a difficult ask. Like 4th, 5th, that might be a hard hold, but like obviously ABU keep. Revised is kind of the wild card. I think revised ones are fine to hold. It's still the original art. It doesn't have the date on it. It's like kind of safe. And then the Masterpiece and Secret Lair stuff, right? Those are I think those are the easy holds into forever, but I think it's just easier to reprint, infinite versions of the same art Mana Vaults that you just want to ditch. And if you wanted to swing from an UMA into an older one, the revised ones aren't that much more expensive than UMA.
And there's plenty of people that prefer black border to white.
Yep. So you can make that swing if you would want. That's an opportunity as well. Otherwise, I think it's another good sell call. I honestly forgot that you picked all 3 of these cards, I think, over time.
Yeah.
And I think you did make a call at some point for a Jeweled Lotus sell.
I did, yes.
Before all this happened. But we will be touching on all of that in a couple of weeks because, like the savants we are, we scheduled our CEDH episode for 2 weeks from now.
Oops.
I wouldn't say whoops. It's just hindsight. We had foresight, and it was like 2010.
You got to try 4 and then 3 and then 2 and then 1.
It's true. And so we'll be touching on all this in that episode as well. But a lot of this stuff around Commander, I think, is always going to be another lesson learned. And just how often do I need to reevaluate my position on these cards? And am I okay if the bottom falls out?
Yeah.
Because as we're learning with Commander, unless you're Soul Ring, there are no sacred cows when it comes to reprint, and there are no sacred cows when it comes to banning, again, unless your name is Soul Ring.
Yeah.
Then you just got a free pass.
They literally said that. Yeah.
Yeah. So you really have to make a decision now. And I think this is a good reminder and a good call.
Thanks.
No problem. Anything before we cut out?
No. But, well, maybe. I am now determined to draft Foresight at the next VRD.
Okay, that's fair.
Yeah.
So watch for that. We'll let you know when that VRD is coming up. But for at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube, I am at Halt. I am Reptar. You are
at Damon_Thurston.
We'll see you next week.